unbeknownst to me and my wife, they had actually set up a shadow company using a different name, but using all of our intellectual property.
Oh.
And I found out about that just because one of our clients sent a PowerPoint deck with a capabilities presentation that didn't have our name on it. And it had their name on it. We later learned there was an entire social engineering campaign around destroying us so they could steal our clients and our business. And so, for example, they went to our landlord and said that we were going to be declaring bankruptcy, which was not true.
Welcome to Unspoken Security, the raw and gritty podcast for security professionals who are looking to understand the most important issues related to making the world a safer place, including intelligence-driven security, risks and threats in the digital and physical world, and discussions related to corporate culture, leadership, and how world events impact all of us on and off our keyboards. In each episode, host AJ Nash engages with a range of industry experts to dissect current trends, share practical insights, and address the blunt truths surrounding all aspects of the security industry.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unspoken Security. I'm your host, AJ Nash. I spent 19 years in the intelligence community, mostly at NSA. I've been building maturing intelligence programs in the private sector for about 8 years. I'm passionate about intelligence, security, public speaking, mentoring, and teaching. And I also have a master's degree in organizational leadership from Gonzaga University. Go Zags. And I continue to be deeply committed to servant leadership as a result. This podcast brings all of those elements together with some incredible guests to have authentic, unfiltered conversations on a wide range of challenging topics. It's not going to be your typical polished podcast. Perfect example. I don't do a lot of editing. My dog might make an appearance. She won't today, I don't think, because she's not around, but it happens. People argue and debate. We might even swear here. I'm notorious for that. And that's all okay. Think of this as the podcast really is more like a conversation that you'd overhear at a bar or after a long day at one of the larger cybersecurity conferences. These are the conversations we usually have when nobody's listening. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Gary Berman. Gary is CEO of Cyberman Security and refers to himself as the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity, which I think is fantastic. He's got a 30-year career focused on marketing communications and consumer research. Until recently, he knew very little about technology and even less about cybersecurity, but now knows everything about the devastating effects of losing a company to a persistent series of insider attacks. Gary pivoted from victim to advocate to help others avoid the life-altering consequences of hacking. His educational vehicle is a superhero comic series and animated platform called the Cyberhero Adventures, Defenders of the Digital Universe. And he's also the host of the Cyberhero Adventures show, where he shines the light on the true cybersecurity heroes who toil in anonymity to keep all of us safe online. And I'm hoping many people in the audience are going to connect with that. I know a lot of folks are having these discussions right now. Gary began his career as a founder and CEO of Market Segment Research, a leading firm specializing in the demassification of American marketing. His clients have included AT&T, Best Buy, Ford, General Motors, a lot of the big ones, right? And his research on multicultural markets led him to an appointment on President Clinton's Commission on Race. He's married to Valerie and his dad to Sarah and Ilana. Gary, is there anything more you want to add? Excuse me, anything I left out of your bio or anything else you want to highlight there?
No, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. And thanks to you, AJ, for your service at the NSA and throughout your career. And I maybe this is a bit of a mutual admiration society. It's just that, part of my mission is to shine the light on the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe at work, at home, at school. So thanks to you.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. So as we get into the topic today, we mentioned, victim to advocate, it was in here, and that's actually the topic today. The topic is the journey from victim to advocate, right? So listen, the world's a dangerous place. We all know that, I think. Every adult, I think even most children do. It's dangerous in the physical world. It's dangerous in cyberspace, even for people who are educated, aware, smart folks. Becoming a victim of criminals does not mean you're not any of those things. It just means it happened. Like the criminals are also aware and smart and working very hard to do bad things to us. So, you have this comic book series. And so I'm a bit of a comic book fan. I'm not an expert. So anybody out there who wants to quiz me on details of comic books, you're going to find very quickly when I say I'm a fan, it probably would offend you. I'm not that deep into it, but I like comic book movies. I grew up on some comic books. And what I remember about comic books is that every hero has an origin story. So does every villain, I guess. But every character of significance has this origin story. They were somebody and then they weren't. Spider-Man was bitten by a radioactive spider. Batman's parents were murdered when he was a child. There's something that made them change, right? That the catalyst that sent them on a different path. So you have an interesting story as well. I don't think there's any radioactive spiders involved. At least I haven't heard of them. But I really wanted to dig in a little bit to your origin story. You talked about going from victim to advocate. And I think this is a really impactful story. So can we talk a bit about your origin story and what motivates you and what you're passionate about now?
Yeah, thanks for that great question. This whole notion of origin stories, I learned, is really in large part based on a well-regarded mythologist, Joseph Campbell, who's passed away. But, he was considered by many to be one of the generators of the hero's journey. And there's been a lot of science about that. And most stories, at least according to Joseph Campbell, have exactly what you described. And there are actually a number of steps that can kind of be codified through the hero's journey. And, a hero could be anything. It could be because you're a good father or you love your dog or, fill in the blank. It's the nature of storytelling. And so for me, just the fact that I am telling you that I learned this is part of why I refer to myself as the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity. Because everyone knows that movie and Forrest just shows up in these historic and amazing situations and has no idea of why or how he got there. Well, you're looking at him. I mean, really. And we'll unpack some of the reasons why I say it. There's some examples of why I say that during our conversation. But to make a very complicated story short, as you mentioned, my wife and I had started a marketing company, data analytics, things like that. It was very successful. We, after 10 years, were able to sell 49% of it to, at the time, I think the largest or the second largest marketing company in the whole world, called the WPP Group, based out of London. And they owned about 90, companies, giant, and we were the smallest. We were just like a little rounding error, but still, we're incredibly grateful when these big companies didn't want to take on an assignment, for like $200,000. We said, yes, please, and it was great. It was really working. And until one day we started realizing that, sales were sort of leveling off. We had been on a hockey stick growth curve. We didn't really have any understanding as to why, because, we had a stellar reputation, had done work. You mentioned national security for the White House and other things like that. And to, sort of get to the bottom line, unbeknownst to us at the time, a group of insiders, trusted insiders, basically spoofed my identity and our company's identity without anyone knowing it. So at the time, we had no idea. One day, I got a call. Remember those Motorola phones, the big bricks with the...
Sure. I had one of those, actually. I thought I was so cool with that giant brick phone. It was good for about, an hour maybe, and it cost like $12 a minute to use or some garbage. But yeah,
well,
I remember those.
That's the point. So because it was so expensive at the time, I didn't give the number out to, many people at all. Only my better half and my joint venture partners. So lo and behold, my phone rings one day, and I just knew that it was important for the reasons I'm saying. And one of the CEO of one of our sister companies that we're doing great with, what is your policy on swearing?
No, swear all you want. This is an adult program. Swear all you want. Yeah, I think the audience is aware. I say all sorts of things, so you can direct quote or swear however you feel.
Well, since there might be, children, I'll just use the term. She said, WTF is going on with your company. And I'm going like, what do you mean?
Uh-oh.
That's what I said. And she said, I just got a call from one of your people. I now know who it was, but at the time had no clue. And the partner said to me, I was told that she had found religion and that she could no longer live with her conscience.
Oh, no.
Because there was rampant fraud in the call center aspect of our business, which, by the way, this insider ran. And so I went, oh, you're no way. Anyways, and she was steaming mad because we were friends. It was going great. They wanted me to take over one of their divisions and things like that. And right then this happened. So I said, let me get back to you by end of day. I called an all hands meeting, including the criminals. But at the time, I didn't know that.
Didn't know they were the criminals, right?
No. And so we completely revalidated the work without even asking. I refunded $185,000 to the client. It was a big automotive company. Yeah.
What year was this?
This was would have been like 2000, 2001.
Okay. I was just thinking for context. I mean, 180 grand's a lot every day of the week, every year, but even more so if you're talking about, 20 plus years ago now.
That's right. And so, but this is relevant still, and I'll explain why. So I took a deep breath, did the responsible things that I just mentioned and other things just to make the client whole and to kind of get the relationship on the right track. And then guess what happened?
They still left you as a client and badmouthed you?
No, I got a second call from a different client.
Oh, sure.
Verbatim, the exact same thing. And I said, you're kidding. Now, these are significant companies. This was a global consulting company. And I was doing all the due diligence for their acquisitions. So the information I had was valuable, right? To individual companies or even, not to sound arrogant, but maybe even to the country a tiny bit, and to national security a tiny bit. And so I went the same exercise, and then a third client called, and I said, WTF, exponentially. And I said, this is just nuts. Anyways, to make a very long and difficult era a little bit short, I literally caught one of the culprits red-handed when I walked into his office, and he happened to be downloading all this client data onto an external hard drive. And he had no authorization to be there. There was like zero rationale. I said, what are you doing? And I'll never forget, he just gave this like maniacal smile. And he laughed, and he took his finger and he pointed it like right at my nose within about 3 inches. And he said, you have no idea what stalking is.
Oh my God. Wow.
And I went, you need to leave now. Anyways, we got him out of the building, and I'll pause because there's a lot more to why I just said that to see what you think so far.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating. And you don't have to pause even. We'll keep going because I think it's fascinating. So, we're in 2001. You're running a successful business, and it turns out that there are people in your company that are undermining you and damaging your business and your reputation with some of your biggest clients. And this is, listen, I'm not an insider threat expert. I work with some folks in insider threat. I've had some on the show, and we'll have more. I know the monitoring has improved a lot since 2001, certainly. I know some of it at least existed, but again, some companies didn't have it, and some still don't have great monitoring of insider threats because it's not in the budget or whatever it might be. But did you figure out, what was the motivation? Why were these people doing this? What were they getting from this? Were they stealing the refunds? What was coming from this? Why was this happening?
Yeah. So the first motivation was financial. Unbeknownst to me and my wife, they had actually set up a shadow company using a different name, but using all of our intellectual property. And I found out about that just because one of our clients sent a PowerPoint deck with a capabilities presentation that didn't have our name on it. And it had their name on it. We later learned there was an entire social engineering campaign around destroying us so they could steal our clients and our business. And so, for example, they went to our landlord and said that we were going to be declaring bankruptcy, which was not true at all. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I mentioned the word stalking. So that manifests in terms of cyber stalking. And a whole bunch of techniques that are now very well understood. But at the time, we weren't really thinking about cybersecurity. It wasn't part of the country's zeitgeist, so to speak, or certainly mine, and one of the things I really own up to is I was like Bambi. like really just, or, sitting duck and hugging everyone and giving them raises and cards while they work for me. And they were doing this right under my nose.
Oh,
and so it went on for a long time, like maybe 5 years. I struggled. I ended up losing everything, had to sell my house. And it wasn't just me. In aggregate, I had to lay off about 100 people, that kind of thing. And it destroyed my life.
But greed was the motive, it sounds like, then, from their standpoint. They
was the first,
they just wanted to steal it, right?
First of three motivations.
Okay.
Kind of fast forwarding to what I'll call modern times, which for me is about 8 or 9 years ago. So during the intervening period of time, I worked on things like veterans causes, and my wife and I started a tutoring program for children and things like that. So fast forward to 8 or 9 years ago, literally just to put food on the table, because, I paid back money that I was not responsible for, just to keep my name and things like that. So I asked my wife what she thought about me sort of re-entering the ecosystem that I had left 10 or so years prior.
Wow.
So I took a deep breath and, I put out a few, calls or emails, like less than 5. And I was really humbled to be invited to be a keynote speaker at a pretty big conference.
You can name it if you want, or not, but just so you know, you're welcome to name anything you want.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big conference, and so it went very well. And people came up to me, "Hey, Gary, are you still doing these, big reports? Or, are you still doing this and that? Can I get a proposal, from you?" Because I had a great reputation. Really, we worked very hard to earn the respect of a very important community of people. Anyways, so I had this big stack of business cards. All these people came up to me, and I'm thinking, yeah, thank you, God. Phoenix rising from the ashes. Easy peasy. We're back. And so, I had a great night's sleep. Got up really early because I'm pumped up. Like at 4 a.m, and I decided to go to LinkedIn, which is not something that I'd really had occasion to use, but I did. And the day following my speech, not one, but 2 of the criminals checked my LinkedIn profile on the same day. So,
and this is 9 years later, you're saying? 10 years later?
That's right.
So you're
talking
it gets even 2011,
more,
2012, something like that.
Yeah.
But they stayed persistent. They still kept track of you long after they had destroyed you and you'd moved on to other things.
You don't know the half of it.
Oh my God.
So anyways, they checked my LinkedIn profile, and I documented this stuff because I thought it would be an interesting story, and that no one would believe, including your listeners. If I unpack a little bit more, I'm going to be judicious about sort of how far we can go in public forum like this.
Understood.
But suffice it to say that, I dealt with the FBI, the Secret Service, and other things. Anyways, so the day after my speech, like I said, I was all excited, and guess what happened? Boom, boom. The attack started again.
Oh my God.
And at the time, I didn't know that. I could see some effects of things just as a regular consumer, just a person using a laptop or a phone or GPS or, other things, other devices, just as, I can see it. Say, well, that's weird. Why is my screen wobbling? I'll just tell you one of hundreds of incidences that I can enumerate, but wobbly screen came to mind, which is now everyone knows that you can track a car either by an Apple AirPlay or something more sophisticated or GPS, on your car or whatever. But at the time, I had no idea. And so my GPS screen in my car was wobbly. So I said, oh, okay, I'm just going to go to the car dealer and fix it. Like I wasn't hyper vigilant or anything yet.
Sure.
I am now, but at the time I wasn't. And so I go to, local General Motors dealer or whatever. And I said, oh, my screen is wobbly on my GPS. Can you, fix it? So I'm in the waiting room. The guy that came out was the boss's boss of the guy that took that I met, the service
Sure.
guy. And he takes his finger and he waves me over like this. And I go, like, me? He goes, yeah, I was in the waiting room. And he was white like a ghost. I mean, really, it was surreal. And so he said, here, follow me. I went, okay. So we go into the service bay, with all the cars, the really noisy, car repair place.
Yeah.
And I saw that my car was up, but now is down on the ground on a ramp. And he says, go around to the passenger side. I said, me? Yeah, I thought I was just going to drive my car home or get it.
Right.
And so I go into the passenger side, I go in, and then he gets in the driver's side, and he says this out loud to no one. He goes, ma'am, I have the owner of the vehicle with me now. And I'm going, oh, great. I'm having all this crazy shit happen. And now I got a guy who's talking to no one, what could possibly go wrong. And it turns out it was OnStar, the operator from OnStar. If those are not familiar, that's a General Motors customer service thing. And she said, how many vehicles do you own? And I said, one. He said, well, there are 36 cars attached to your account, and they can hear every word you say in your car.
Wow.
That's what I said. I said, what do you mean 36 cars? I said, there are 36 vehicles.
This is horrifying.
Do you own a Yukon, whatever? I go, no. Do you own a GMC, whatever? I go, no. I just had one car. And I knew no one would believe me. That's a recurring trope.
It's unbelievable.
Just like Forrest Gump. I mean, he just shows up like, I don't know, I play ping pong or I met another president, whatever.
Right.
I'm telling you, that's me, or it was. Anyways, so I said, would you be kind enough to put this in writing?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I might use this in some way. At the time, I knew nothing about what I'm telling you or what I'm about to tell you. I was completely naive. And I didn't know I had an idea who the insiders were, but that's different than proving it in court, I have learned. And so they wrote it, and I have a document from the letterhead of the car dealer that this happened. And that's when my antenna started going up. And I started realizing all these other, what became known as attack vectors that seemed to happen, but not forensics. Just experiential things. And, and I created a slide deck just to hold some of my images, not with the intention of showing them to anyone.
Yeah, I've done that before, sure.
I just thought, it was an interesting story, and I don't know, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So anyways, to go forward a little bit, there were actually 19 attack vectors, both through Cyber rather, and also some things in real life that happened.
This is horrifying.
I'll stop there.
Well, listen. So
wait, stay tuned for more. Here's the commercial break.
There's people like, no, don't stop. I want to know more. So this is 10 years now. You've had insiders who you employed who have destroyed your business, destroyed your life, financially speaking. Like, they stole your accounts, they destroyed your reputation, they bankrupted you, you rebuilt, started over, had a whole different career, decided to come back into this industry, do one keynote address, and they're still right there 10 years later, apparently. And they're everywhere from what you're saying. Like, they're, you said 17 vectors. So, I have to assume like email and phones, and, your cars are obviously, compromised. And I'm sure there's others you're going to mention. So, at this point, like, you've got law enforcement involved. I
tried.
How did you feel? But the answer is going to be pretty obvious. But
law enforcement.
How did you feel is one of the questions, and the other one is, I know we talked about motives. Financial was one. I know you said there's a couple more. I do want to get into, like, what did you learn about the motives? Like, somebody was this persistent for this long. It wasn't just about money. So, how are you feeling at this point, and what are you learning as you go through on this with with whoever these people are?
Well, there's a lot that I can fill you in now, maybe a tiny bit. But to answer your question about what have I learned, cybersecurity has this very, common term, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. And I was in that headspace for a long time. And I decided to pivot from FUD to fun.
Okay.
just from a purely emotional and psychological survival sort of technique for me. And so many other cyber related things happen. I'll just skip for a moment. And then I want to go back to the other motivations to answer your question more thoroughly. So I knew I had to learn about cybersecurity, and like, where do you start? I was 57 years of age at the time. So I bought a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies. You ever seen those yellow books, like with the black stripe on it?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Perfect.
Sure.
I'm very self-aware. So I got this book, and page 1, by only page 10, AJ, I was lost. So rather than quitting, I looked on the back. It was put out by Palo Alto Networks, this book. And I found this CISO of Palo Alto Networks at the time, great guy. And I got him on the phone. And by the way, the only reason I got him on the phone is one of my redeeming qualities, if I have one, is I'm pretty relentless. So, of course, my name is Gary, and I called this guy 17 times.
Oh,
and finally, he answered the phone. He goes, "Hey, John, how's it going?" He picked up the wrong friggin' line. That's the only reason I got him. And I went, "Oh, yeah, this is Gary Berman." He goes, "Oh, shit." But we became friends. And I told him that story, that I was lost after 10 pages, and he started laughing. So I'm like a funny guy, having lost everything. And I asked him, "Why you're laughing so hard?" And he essentially replied, "Well, it's not really for beginners." Then why do you call it cybersecurity for dummies?
Right.
And that's when I realized there had to be a different, perhaps better way to distill the complexity of cybersecurity into something people could get their heads around. And as you can see from my background here, I thought, superhero comics, because I happened to see Spider-Man. You mentioned Peter Parker, and the light bulb went off. However, there were some problems with that. Number one is I had no idea about the topic or what I was talking about. I knew no stories other than my own.
Right.
And I didn't know anyone to talk to about it. But other than that, I guess I was perfect. So, I went on LinkedIn and I did a search by CISO, and I got, all these people, and invited one at a time to connect with me, to send me real life stories of cybercrime, answering the questions, what happened? What were the consequences? What were the lessons learned for possible inclusion into, a comic or something? And last time I checked, I have 24,000 connections on LinkedIn with the most important people in the world. They're all high level people like you.
Well, hold on a second. You have one not very important person, because I'm in that network, and I appreciate the compliment, but I am not in that category. So I appreciate that I've snuck in somehow.
Copy that. See, I just said copy that. Like, why would I say those words? You
Right.
understand?
Very military or law enforcement thought process.
Or both.
Yeah.
And anyway, so it became a thing. I started doing these comics. I went to 54 cybersecurity conferences, and I'll show you the source of my
Gotta be the badge
superpower.
collection. Yep. We've all got one of these, right? These are the best. I love a good badge collection.
Conferences.
They're good, though. I love the good badge collection. So you're getting into the next question, which is great, because my next question was, why comic books, right? We've talked about the origin story, and I know we'll get more in there, but now you're starting to explain the why comic books. I personally, for anybody who hasn't, I will say it's humbling when you read a book that's for dummies and you realize you're too dumb. And I've been there, and I don't mean you, I mean me. When you realize you're too dumb for the book for dummies, you're like, wow, is there a book for imbeciles? Like, what's next? So it's interesting that you saw this, from what I'm hearing, and we'll get back to your story on it, as an opportunity, right? Hey, there's a better way to communicate. There's a different way to communicate, because a lot of these books that say they're for dummies will do nothing but make you feel dumber. I've had it happen. So this is interesting. So you saw comic books as a means, right? So yeah, keep going with that, please.
That's right. But they have substantive information in them. So, there was a very interesting series of experiences attempting to learn about storytelling and, how to ideally strike a balance between the substance of what you're saying, this is not for children. These were for the inner child of adults, to be more precise, and style of how you go about it. So it's like this balance of style and substance, which is, I've learned, not easy to do well. And anyway, so it became a thing. I started going to conferences. I occasionally wear a costume, a cyberhero costume. My wife thinks I'm batshit, but that's a whole different story.
Certainly a possibility, by the way. These are not mutually exclusive.
I'll go with that. Yeah.
You're crazy in a good way, though. So
just call me Forrest.
There you go.
And so became a thing. So I would autograph comics at DEF CON. Like one year I autographed like over 3,000 copies of the comic.
Jeez.
Yeah. It turns out people in cybersecurity and technology like Marvel. They like DC. They like comics and video games and all that stuff. But it was not intentional. And then after going to a number of conferences, I became a reporter for Cybersecurity magazine. So the whole ecosystem, kind of turned towards me because they wanted me to write about whatever they were working on or whatever their solutions are and things like that. And I've never been a vendor. I essentially donate just about everything. I've had a few sponsors for our comics, but I've never really tried to make money, which turns out to be a really good strategy to earn trust in a zero trust ecosystem. Oh, nice. So now I can pick up the phone or whatever and talk to the highest level people in government and big companies.
Well, they know you're not going to pitch them, right? They don't cringe.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't duck the phone call. Everybody's caller ID, right? Everybody knows somebody. They're like, oh, I can't talk to this person. And they don't have to worry about that with you because you're there to try to provide a service or counsel or something like that. I happen to agree with this. I mean, there's money that tends to be made from this eventually, but it isn't so overt and pushy. It does take a lot of faith that what you're providing is valuable and that people will see value in it. And there's a way to generate some revenue later. Because obviously, unless I'm mistaken, your mortgage company is probably like mine. They don't take smiles. They actually like cash. So we all have some bills to pay. But I think it's great that, people know, hey, if Gary calls, I should pick up the phone and talk. It's probably going to be, useful and valuable. And it's not just going to be some hard pitch to give me, give me money, right?
Yeah. It's taken me 9 years to earn that. And the most common question I always get is, how do you make money? Or said a different way, are you non-for-profit? I go, I'm for profit. I just don't make any profit. But it is cathartic, which is why I did it, from the beginning. And so only now, in the last couple of weeks, after all this time. Oh, by the way, I want to fill in one other quick thing. You mentioned about the show. I've interviewed over 300 thought leaders on the most important things in the world, geopolitics, the role of quantum cryptography, which I failed algebra, by the way, but don't tell anyone.
Well, I think you just told everyone that.
Oh, well. And, the role of AI and authors and luminaries and just scientists and super smart people about all this crazy.
And for those who missed the opening, this is the Cyberhero Adventures show you're talking about. This is your show.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is worth checking out. So anyway, I just make sure people know as you're saying this, the context. Oh, I should go look at that. So
yeah, I just put it on LinkedIn. I don't even put it on YouTube or anything. I've never tried to do anything with it. It was really more, catharsis. And I guess maybe that's why I have, like these 24,000 followers and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's very hard to do what you do at the level that you do it. And I congratulate you, for it. Yeah. I think people may not understand it. So even for me, so like I have 3 sort of shows that I have to edit and, I'm just like doing this all myself and, it's a slog, but hopefully worthwhile. So let me go back to the reasons, like why did the attackers do this and for such a duration? So the first one was money. That's easy to understand. So as I, tried to work with various law enforcement agencies over a long period of time, I had, for example, 2 FBI agents looking over my shoulder at my laptop. And right when they were there, this giant cursor starts moving around my screen with my hands. And I go like this, look, do you see that? You got it? Yeah, we got it. We got it. They saw it with their own eyes.
Sure.
But I wasn't able to prove economic damages that rise to the level of their, decision-making, although they did present it to the district attorney, but at the time they didn't take the case, and it's not for lack of trying, but I love law enforcement, by the way. And I love the cyber people in law enforcement. I've done many shows shining the light on what they do and why they do it. I think they're real unsung cyber heroes. So anyways, so the first motivation was money. The second one was this, I'll pull back the curtain a tiny bit by telling you that, I'm going to use the word apparently. Apparently, there's some connections to a criminal organization that kind of represents itself as a religious cult.
Okay. Yep. For those who put those together, I got it.
Say anything else about that except, my impression And what I've learned is I am not the only one this has happened to at all. And they're actually written policies that talk about how to deal with, sort of enemies of this organization, which I was designated one, I think, all those years ago, because inadvertently we hired someone who I'll just put allegedly was a member of this organization, and we didn't know. And so that's part of the approach that apparently this organization uses, widespread. And the really kind of third motivation around that is they happen to be, I have learned, really fixated on statistics. And I owned a market research company that generated statistics. So, and there's one last sort of nexus. These are my hypotheses. And there's one of the nexus, which is this whole idea of superheroes in comics. And it's found in their legacies and stuff. I mean, it's really just not believable, and I didn't believe it for the longest time. However, eventually something looks like a duck and walks like a duck and squawks like a duck. It's probably a duck. And so that's the contours of that may help answer
so you got
some of the motivations.
You got greed and you got religious zealotry. I'll go with that. And I know why you're not naming the group. I think most people can probably figure out who we're talking about, but I also won't name them for respect, because you haven't. If you choose to, I would, but I'm not going to put something in that obviously you're intentionally avoiding saying. But I think if anybody
they're very litigious.
Exactly. Yeah. If anybody wants to, put the dots, connect the dots, they can. If they can't, feel free to reach out to me.
No, I'd rather don't. Just treat this as a random thoughts of a cluttered mind.
Right. Hey, don't steal that. We had this discussion. I think I'm going to use that for something. No, I guess you can't steal it.
Go ahead.
But I may steal that for something else. All right. So you got financial motivations. You got religious zealotry. Was there a third motivation tied to this too? Or was it just?
Well, it was statistics, and then also I do superhero comics, and it's a thing.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, that explains it. I mean,
there's another. Forgive the interruption, but there's another thing, and this is totally Forrest Gump. But I think, socially engineered on how my journey in cybersecurity has happened, and who, why, and who. That's all I can sort of say about that. But it's why I'm so interested in cybersecurity specifically, and why I've stayed with it for the duration that I have, because this idea of shining the light. I mean, Justice Brandeis, I think, to paraphrase, he said, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yes.
I mean, he said something much more elaborate than that, but I don't know. I think it's sort of cool shining the light, without identifying and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
This is the first time I've ever spoken publicly about this.
Oh, wow. Well, I appreciate it. I'm honored that this is a place you felt comfortable enough to do that. Good news is I have like 9 listeners, so nobody's going to know any more than they knew before. At least, but
it's quality, not quantity. You
That's
have to
exactly right.
think about your
exactly
metrics.
Right. And it also makes sense, because I was, in my own head as we were going through this, I'm like, all right, financial motivation, I get. Criminals do that all the time. But why would somebody stick with it, 10 years later, and the persistence? And it's the zealotry then that makes sense. That makes people become fixated. Whatever that belief system is. I'm not interested in judging other people's belief systems, at least not today. But whether it's politics, whether it's religion, it's got to be something so deeply ingrained that they feel a compulsion to continue. So it's a mixture. It's not, the financial stuff, it's unlikely somebody would continue keep tabs on somebody for a decade and then try to ruin them a second go around over money. They probably would have moved on. But this other piece, this fixation, which is
it's actually codified.
Okay. Oh, even worse. So it's actually part of the requirements, sort of like, to use a different example, if you had an organization where it was built into their rules, right? Their laws, their rules, that they must go out and convert, let's say. We'll use that as an example.
That's right.
And so you have people that will then, I mean, they're not doing it even by choice, so to speak. They're part of a religion, they're part of a group, they're part of an organization, and they deeply believe in it. And it is they're compelled then. Like, this is part and parcel of being in that organization. So knowing that it's codified into the rule system, that means they're going to be very persistent, unfortunately. And as you said, they're also
there's a simple reason for that to me. I mean, simple, that's not the correct adjective, but it's easy to understand why it works.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, bullying is a successful tactic if you don't care about morals or ethics and you have a significant advantage over your targets. Bullying's pretty successful. It will make people change their behavior or go into hiding or whatever. Bullying and stalking and, I mean, horrible things are successful tactics if left unchecked. I mean, they just are.
So, yeah. So what tools does a victim have in this kind of setting? And there are many public court cases and things like that documenting this, nothing to do with me. And so I do something that I just sort of call it mirroring. I mean, actually, that is a communication technique. But, so if the first thing I do is like naming it, So for me, I just refer to them as goofballs because it's just less scary, And so I created characters. I anthropomorphize my characters that essentially are, depending on how you look at them or think about them, can be real people. So I have, Sonny, the social engineer, with each one has its own origin story. And, Ivan, the identity thief, or Vernon, the virus, or Boris, the bug, or Phoebe, the fisher, So I came up with these anthropomorphized characters. Like you see a couple.
Yeah, see behind you. Vernon's back there.
Yeah, I came up with 16 characters. 8 were villains, 8 were heroes, and some amazing stories about the heroes. These are based on real people, but we don't draw them so they look like themselves unless they want it. Okay. And I've had some who want to be depicted just so they can show their families what they do at work. But many people I deal with are in clandestine sorts of things, cybersecurity, whatever. And so,
what a cool idea. You took a terrible circumstance, it's something, a terrible event, survived it, and then actually were able to turn it into something positive because you found another opportunity, right? The whole, For Dummies book series not really working for dummies like me, at least, and said, hey, the ability to do that. I mean, I got to be honest, the resilience, the courage, to come back into the industry, and the creativity, combining with the creativity. Listen, I've seen, some of this, and it's good, and it's beyond it's not amateurish. If I tomorrow said I'm going to do comics, nobody's going to want anything to do with those, because even children would say this is garbage, because I don't have that skill set. I don't have that talent to first overcome everything you have, and then to be able to turn it into something so positive and so productive is, it's just really remarkable, to be honest with you. And it leads me to the next question, which is, what now? What are you working on next? You had a career, you had a business, you had a very successful business, you had wealth. Things you were a victim. I mean, there's no other way to put it. You were a victim and ended up in a very bad position that you didn't deserve, and had to rebuild. You've done that again, and you've got this very cool platform. I know, I've seen pictures, obviously, of you in a cape and a mask and doing this real thing at the conferences, and you've built something very cool and very, contributory to society and to our industry. What's next? What are you working on now? What's the new cool thing?
First of all, thank you for your kind words, and to your listeners, something I say because I really mean it, thanks for who you are and for what you do, and most importantly, why you do it. So what's next? I'm working on something pretty cool, which is, it started last November. One of my many mentors, and that's one of the great things about my Forrest Gump journey, I have some unbelievable mentors. We meet every week and talk about different cyber or national security things. And so one of them in November of last year was not his usual self. All my mentors are sort of bubbly and on the fun side, even though they're very credible, like you. And you realize you're being adopted now live.
I get that.
You're being socially engineered. But not very good because I said it out loud. But
yeah, you're not really sneaky about it, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, you have to be sneaky. So anyways, was not his usual self. And I said, is everything okay? And he goes, not really. I just got unceremoniously fired from my company along with 10 of my colleagues. And my jaw just dropped because he was a field CISO for education. And from what I understand about this ecosystem, they're great to have because they have the technical chops, to be able to understand cybersecurity, but, very effective communicators, and thought leaders and things like that. And he went on to tell me that it wasn't just him, it was him and 10 other people. So the field CISO for financial services, telecommunications, so on and so forth. And my jaw just dropped. And I started getting angry because he's such a great guy. And after a little while, I said, Bob, forgive the interruption, but I have an idea. And he goes, what's that? I said, let's start a company. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I don't know. But when smart people get together, good things can happen. And so we started just listening to my community, so to speak, and how's it going? And I started hearing some, very consistent themes. Like for the first time, there are layoffs in cybersecurity because of the macroeconomic conditions. This whole notion of working anywhere, and virtual and fractional employment, the role of artificial intelligence in the future, the nexus of cybersecurity and AI and its implications and all these other things. And so it started percolating, and, we basically are, with some smart people, are co-creating in the beginning stages of developing a platform that will solve a number of problems that we listened and learned about. And there are 7 of them, but the first one and most important one is just, if you think that if I tell you that I'm a CISO and you think that I am, there's no CPA test, there's no bar exam. There are lots of certifications. However, they may not mean things to different people, and this is especially true in the mid-sized market, the small to medium business market. 80% of them don't have any IT help, let alone something sophisticated. So this could be, critical infrastructure like water treatment facilities or electrical, although electric is pretty good, transportation, so on and so forth. And so I decided that I'd like to find a way to scale high-level CISO talent in a fractional way to protect the hundreds of thousands, millions of small to medium businesses that reside in the United States. And we're developing, a way we hope a pretty innovative way to do that. That's all I can say at the moment.
Some of what you've mentioned was I've experienced it personally. I'm obviously seeing some of this. We've all known for a long time in this industry that small and medium businesses struggle with security and with cybersecurity. They struggle with the budgeting. It's a hard thing because cyber is everywhere. If you're connected, right? I talk about this being the cost of living in an interconnected world, but then not having the resources to keep up with the adversaries. And a lot of people think, well, we're small. We can hide within the noise, or really they just don't have a choice. I mean, it's not that they don't underestimate the threat. They just don't have the resources for it. And every company I've been associated with, that's the flip side, is companies saying, how do we capture the small and medium market? Because there's so much potential there, but we can't get our pricing in a position where we can help, right? So it becomes a challenge. And I've seen that. And then the other thing that you mentioned, fractional, this big push towards that, organizations not wanting to have full-time senior people in a lot of places, including security. I've seen CISOs that aren't what a lot of people might consider a CISO. I mean, they hold the role, or maybe they don't even hold the title. They have the responsibilities, but you look and you go, well, this person hasn't been doing it very long. And I'm not trying to denigrate anybody's skill set or anything, but you just look and go, this is not what the position used to be, but this is what they're willing to pay. And then that person has those responsibilities and maybe didn't have that background. So I think this is great that you're saying, hey, we've identified these challenges and you're developing a platform with, I won't poke too much on this. I know it's something it's early stage and I'm not trying to get ahead of you on this, but it's something I'm definitely going to want to follow and learn more about. If I can help, obviously I'd be interested in it, because I think there's a market, there's an opportunity there. And frankly, you've shown, for those who are curious, in my opinion, why it would matter, you've shown all the things that I would want to be associated with. Somebody who's resilient, somebody who's smart, somebody who still has a positive attitude and wants to contribute. Like, that isn't, I don't think how everybody would have reacted to what you've been through. I think a lot of people would have run away and hid and never done it again. I think people might have come back vindictive and bitter, which would have been justifiable in my opinion. And you're neither of those things, from what I can tell. Like, if you're hiding it really well. You said, hey, I'm gonna do more to help people, and you're so creative that I have to assume this is going to be successful, because you've identified a problem and you're a good person who wants to solve problems in a positive way. So, I mean, from a business standpoint, you're not focused on profits, which is great as a customer, probably not great business math. I'm sure you'll figure out a way to do that as well, because you're going to make some money along the way. But I'm very interested to see it. Like, when we connected and I started reading through some of, what you've done, and then you started telling me the story when we prepped for this, and I was just blown away. I was like, this guy's too good to be on my show, to be honest. So I was like, this is a pretty amazing, amazing person. And I'm super excited, that we've had the chance to meet and talk through this. I'm looking forward to doing stuff off camera and off microphone. like, I can't thank you enough for what you're contributing to the community and just for continuing to do it, for being who you are, basically. Like, you're a big positive part of the community that started out in such a horrible place, that origin story, right? Which brings us back to this. I think you're the superhero. I don't know if you've drawn yourself. I don't know if you're one of the characters, but I mean, you're clearly one of the heroes. Like, you have the origin story. You've come back and done positive things to make the world, the cybersecurity world better and safer, and to raise up the capabilities of people who, struggled with things as simple as Cybersecurity for Dummies, which is, as we both agree, not simple, that book. But you're one of the heroes. Like, have you drawn yourself? I mean, you're pretty humble, so I think I know this, but have you drawn yourself? Are you in the comic, hero universe of your own making or not?
I'll invite folks to go to cyberheroescomics.com, and we have some of our comics up there. I'm not sure about the answer to your question, but maybe people can decide on their own.
Okay. All right, cool. I like that.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not a villain. So
I agree.
But thank you so much for your kind words. I mean, it's incredibly meaningful, and it serves as my fuel, just so you know. It's a privilege for me to do what I do, and I wake up every day, excited and optimistic and incredibly grateful based on, the things you just said. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how this is going to end, because if you think of Forrest Gump, and if I just sort of showed you what's on my desk right now and the people and the characters, I will show you my muse. Right. So this is my muse.
That's Albert Einstein, I'm pretty sure.
It is. It's Albert
Very
Einstein.
Cool. Yeah.
And if you look real closely, you see he has a logo there.
Okay.
That's from Sandia National Laboratories.
Oh, yeah. All right. Very cool.
Why, I would ask rhetorically, would I have one of those? Stay tuned for more.
It's a teaser. It's a teaser. All right. So
it is.
Sandia Labs, Einstein. All right. Gary's got something.
Well, yeah, but the thing about Einstein, I don't want to equate me with Einstein.
No, I wasn't thinking.
Other than in this way, which is, one of the tools, the coping tools in my quiver through this whole experience was I read a quote about Albert Einstein, and a reporter asked him, he said, Mr. Einstein, on one hand, you have science and physics and mathematics and all that. Then he said, on the other hand, you have many people who believe in some universality or God or karma or, those kinds of things. How do you reconcile those two views? And to paraphrase, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And
what a great line.
Ever since I sort of came across that, he said that, I went, oh, that's cool. So what it's enabled me to do is to be open, like to this conversation. I take a deep breath and go, okay, here it goes. Let's see what happens and do the best we can with the resources we have available at the moment, which for me happen to be quite sparse, other than the tools that you pointed out about resilience and friends. I and mentors. I have a lot of them. It's really been my savior for sure.
Well, it's
a great community. Cybersecurity is a great community. It's full of helpers. It's full of legitimate, defenders of this country from a national security perspective, critical infrastructure, education for children. It's an amazingly wonderful community. It is, however, undergoing some really rapid stressors, that have been well documented, like what I said earlier about layoffs or fractional employment or AI. A lot of people in cybersecurity are exhausted.
Absolutely. Burnout is a huge problem. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and this is not my assessment. They tell me, and I've done several shows on well-being and mental health and, things like that to help a tiny bit and stuff. So what I would like to leave the audience with is this notion of hope that, when, as I said earlier, when smart people get together, good things happen. We're definitely stronger together. I think that was the theme of RSA this last year or a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was one of these years. That was one of them. I don't know if it was this year. I'll have to look up. But yeah, RSA did have a theme one year of stronger together. Yeah,
and just, try to pivot from FUD to fun.
I love that.
Notwithstanding the seriousness, in some cases, life sorts of threatening things, like in the case of that 400-bed hospital that gets hacked, or whatever. And we just found out recently that, no surprise, actually, China is in our telecom networks, from big ones and all this craziness. So it's a legitimate battle for values, and it's like that. So I want everyone to get pumped up and feel that there are a lot of people that are grateful.
Yeah, agreed. Just a note, Stronger Together is 2023's theme for anybody who wants to spot check us. 2024 is Art of the Possible. I have the advantage of the internet right here, so I'm searching as we go. But yeah, it was a good one. So listen, we're going to wrap up here. We're getting to the end. I can't thank you enough, and I will in a minute again. But as you know, the name of the show is Unspoken Security. So there's always a question for every guest at the end, and nobody gets to duck it. And with that in mind, I'd like you to tell me, tell the audience something that so far has gone unspoken, like something we don't talk much about.
Well, I act brave because nobody can tell the difference.
That's true.
There you go.
So
that's my unspoken secret.
Yeah, so you act brave. Okay, I think I hear what you're saying, and I think a lot of us do. And if you do it long enough, you convince yourself you are, right. And bravery is our actions, right? That's I used to say, it's not the absence of fear; it's the ability to overcome fear, which sometimes means acting and just kind of saying,
exactly.
This is where, most people I know that are really brave, there's a lot of scared going on. They're no different than anybody else, except they just put it aside and act differently and kind of overcome it. So,
well, the thing about that from what I just said is, I'm acting.
Well,
but that doesn't mean deceiving. It just means, okay, you're confronted with X. So, okay, what are you going to do? You can, fight or flight in the back of our neck. So do you freeze, which is a legitimate response?
Sure.
Do you run? Which is a legitimate response.
It's the right one a lot of times, yeah.
Do you confront it, which is a legitimate response? Or do you take the fight to them, which is also a legitimate response? And that's how we're all made. This is deep brain survival, stuff. And so basically I lean towards, the latter, like acting brave and doing what I can.
Well, and you may be underestimating yourself, or I don't understand. You may be undercrediting yourself, right? If you act brave, you are brave, in my opinion. Like, that's just how it works at some point, right? We are our actions. People who talk brave and don't do things when needed are, I was going to say cowards. I don't want to be cruel. Like, it doesn't, listen,
Right,
their survival skills are just different, right? But if you act brave, you are brave. That's just how it works. We are who we are. And I don't think there's any doubt, in my opinion, at least based on your story, you are brave. I don't think most people would be where you are now based on what they went through. Based on what you went through, I don't think most people would be where you are now. And I don't think they've done the things you did. And it takes courage. It takes bravery. It takes a generous heart as well. Like, again, you continue to want to give, even though giving and helping and being who you were, led to somebody taking, terrible advantage of it and turning things upside down for you. And yet here you are again saying, hey, I just want to keep doing good things. So yeah, you can say you act brave. I'm going to say you are brave, and we can leave that one on the table.
I'll say thank you. I'd like to leave your audience with a tool that I found very valuable to get through to this moment and these thoughts that you're so kindly saying. Which is, this is something also I don't think I've ever said, but when I started realizing, what I think was actually happening. I don't remember if someone sent me a copy of the book or I bumped into it, but there's a very seminal book. It was called On Death and Dying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
By Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she has like the steps of grieving. And it was based on her research of researching people who had just lost loved ones or were in the throes of it or after. And so she came up with, these seemingly recurring stages that people go through. And, so I went through that, and I started with, I think the first one was denial. Like, this is not happening.
Yep.
And all that. And then, I don't want to mangle the order, but
it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Again, I have the advantage of the internet, by the way.
That's right.
Not brilliant, but yeah, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, or depression, acceptance.
Yeah. So I was stuck in denial for a long time, and I was angry. For a real long period of time. 10 years.
Yeah, I believe it.
At least, and then, fast forward to now. I mean, I'm not at acceptance. I'm just not there because, I'm motivated and I'm using to the best of my ability what happened and to turn it into something constructive, as you were kind enough to point out. So I'm not at acceptance, but
well,
I'm not angry or denial either. I'm somewhere in there.
And if I'm not mistaken, not to speak out of turn about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work, but I don't think acceptance means you accept it like it's okay. I think it's just accepting that it happened, right? Because denial is saying something didn't happen. It's not possible.
Yeah,
it didn't. Like in our mind, we're saying this didn't happen. This isn't a real thing. Acceptance is just getting to the point of saying, okay, this happened. This is real.
Okay.
I have to accept that. And I think you are there. You don't accept it in terms of I'm not going to do anything about it. It's okay. It's good. I think, but you certainly, it appears to me, got.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes,
that is accurate. Yes. Yeah, I've accepted that this, was real.
This happened.
I found solace in a community. I'm not talking about cybersecurity at the moment. In a different community of people who know a lot about this, and they were victims, manifest in all types of different ways, and so I found some solace in knowing that I'm like not alone, and that I'm not off my rocker. Because it's very easy. I'm sure you're familiar with the term gaslighting. It's very easy to doubt, things, or, if your antenna are like too high up, then you can see. In fact, there's a very interesting book for our audience, if you want to learn about that, called Ghost in the Wire.
Ghost in the Wire is a great book. Absolutely.
It was one of the earlier books I read about that. And so you could see ghosts like in technology and all that. And you wonder, is someone tracking or listening to my call, whatever. I have actual evidence that these things actually happened. And I was one of the first, an early use case of Bluetooth vulnerabilities,
Jeez.
and just, there were 19. So all this craziness. I gave a speech, which I just posted Thursday for the first time. I guess I'm sort of entering this sort of next stage of what am I going to do about all this stuff, of my speech. And I've been a public speaker my whole career, and I love doing it because I make it about the audience, and I have a lighter touch, so it's funny, things like that. But for this particular speech at the Gartner Security Risk Management Conference in Washington, I was nervous, and I remember sweating like a pig. And the reason I was nervous is because it'd be the first time I'd ever present, some, I'll use air quotes, like evidence to people who could call BS. And so I went and I had taken some of these screenshots of different things like, spoofed Google two-factor authentication, spoofed 3 different Wi-Fi's, user interfaces that were spoofed. Then live, shows that were hacked, and with notes that said, "We know it's live and we're watching you," and on my screen, and so it's very easy to get this stuff wrong. Oh, you didn't update your firmware, whatever, And so I went up and I spoke for 45 minutes, and guess what happened? I got a standing ovation.
That's fantastic.
And from the cybersecurity community who were in attendance.
Get a lot of those.
There were, I'm not exaggerating, 30 or 40 people waiting in line to talk to me. I said, how did this Bluetooth thing happen? I go, how the hell am I supposed to know?
All right,
They're the ones who are supposed to know this stuff, and
Right.
I developed friendships, and now, 8 or 9 years later, some trust.
Yeah. Well, Ghost in the Wires, for those who don't know, and I'd be surprised if many listening don't, Ghost in the Wires by Kevin Mitnick, he's world famous, and we lost him last year, unfortunately. Yeah. It's a fantastic book. It's held up over time. It's brilliant, and even dummies like me understand it. So it's a good read. So listen, we're running out of time. Actually, we're a little over, which is fine because I'm always a little bit over when I have good guests. But I want to thank you for being here. Obviously, thanks for being my friend and for joining the show and for sharing your story. And thanks for everything you've done and keep doing. Thanks. I'm glad you came back to the community. I'm glad you're in the community. I appreciate your work and what you're doing, and I'm excited to see this next stage. So I'm just, I wanted to say thank you. I'm grateful for everything you do and for being here. I'm going to wrap it up. I don't know if you have any last thoughts. I know you've already given some kind of ahead of time on what you want to leave the audience with. Is there anything else you want to say before we close out, though?
just what I say very often, thanks for who you are and for what you do. And most importantly, why you do it. And, to the cybersecurity community and people in national security and law enforcement, the same thing. You're a real life unsung heroes. And there are many people, especially me, who appreciate you very much.
Yep. Yeah, great message. And I agree. We have a lot of people working very hard every day that nobody knows about, nobody talks about. They don't talk about themselves.
Yeah. And they can connect with me on LinkedIn also.
Yeah.
It's probably a good way to do it, or cyberheroescomics.com if you want to see some of our comics and that kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Highly recommend it. Cyberherocomics.com. Or reach out to Gary on LinkedIn. And if for some reason neither of those work, reach out to me and I'll help you get to Gary. I can't imagine that happening. But again, thank you very much for being here, Gary. Thanks for sharing your story and for everything you do. That's going to wrap it up here. So for everybody listening and watching, thank you for being here. And if you like what we're doing, I appreciate if you could subscribe, follow, like, share the news with other people, please, so we can keep this show going. I appreciate everybody out there, so we can keep having people like Gary out to tell stories about amazing things going on in the industry. So thank you all. With that, we're going to end it. And it was great having you here. This has been another episode of Unspoken Security.
That's a wrap for this episode of Unspoken Security. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.